A Florida State University graduate by the name of Rachel Morningstar Hoffman was placed under drug court supervision after officers found cannabis in her possession during a traffic stop on February the 22nd of 2007. In April of the following year, Tallahassee police conducted a search of the young woman's apartment, where they discovered more cannabis, as well as 4 ecstasy pills. She consequently faced criminal charges, but the authorities gave her the opportunity to serve as a police informant to avoid a possible prison sentence. Hoffman agreed, and she was subsequently tasked with obtaining 1,500 ecstasy pills, 2 ounces of cocaine, and 2 handguns, which violated department policy, with $13,000 in a buy-bust operation. On the day of the sting, Hoffman went to the agreed-upon location to meet with a pair of suspects, with 2 narcotics officers monitoring her movements. However, the dealers made a sudden change to the location of the buy. Hoffman was urged not to follow them, but technical issues with the police's equipment prevented her from receiving those instructions. Her handlers lost track of her when she reportedly left with the 2 suspects in a stolen BMW. She was then gunned down by the dealers with one of the firearms she was supposed to purchase. In the aftermath, the Tallahassee Police Department came under fire for sending Hoffman out into the field, despite not having any undercover training or knowledge of either cocaine or guns. The officers involved were suspended with pay, and the victim's family filed a wrongful death suit against the city, which was ultimately settled for a reported $2.6 million. On December the 17th of 2009, what would have been Hoffman's 25th birthday, the 2 suspects identified as Danilo R. Bradshaw and Andrea Jabbar Green were found guilty of murder. Both were given life sentences. In May of 2009, the Florida State Senate passed new legislation dubbed Rachel's Law, which introduced new requirements for law enforcement agencies recruiting confidential informants. Number 6. Victor Castro Martinez. 25-year-old Victor Castro Martinez, an admitted member of the international gang known as MS-13, agreed to cooperate with the police in 2018 as part of a larger investigation into the notorious group. On the evening of June the 6th, Martinez informed his police contact that he was meeting with other MS-13 members at 7600 Long Drive near Cullinan Park in Houston, Texas. The following morning, the informant's mutilated body was found in the park, with the police's audio recording device still in his pocket. It was determined that he'd perished within 30 minutes of sending his final text message to his handler. During the ensuing homicide investigation, it emerged that Martinez had been ambushed by at least 7 gang members identified as Wilson Jose Ventura Meja, Jimmy Villalobos Gomez, Angel Miguel Aguilar Ochoa, Walter Antonia Chiques Garcia, Marlon Miranda Moran, Franklin Trejo Chavarria, and Carlos Elias Enriquez Torres. The assailants allegedly took turns butchering the victim with a machete because of his ties to the authorities. They were each indicted on federal charges in connection to the incident, faced with the possibility of receiving the death penalty. Number 5. Paea Tasini. 22-year-old Danny Geist Jr. was the victim of a fatal gang-related shooting on September the 27th of 2000. He was reportedly gunned down as he sat in a brown Datsun vehicle in Pittsburgh, California. Although the case went cold for several years thereafter, the police broke new ground in the investigation after conducting an interview with a man believed to have been a witness to the shooting. In 2019, a 46-year-old Elk Grove resident named Paea Tasini was asked to provide a statement in support of the authorities' efforts to identify Geist's killer. Tasini obliged, but in doing so inadvertently implicated himself in the crime. The man was said to have given investigators a blow-by-blow account of the situation leading up to the shooting. He'd been inside the car with the man who ultimately executed Geist. The latter had allegedly insulted the shooter and was involved with a drug ring, with which the occupants of Tasini's vehicle had been feuding. During his 2019 interview with police, Tasini eventually confessed to ordering Geist's murder himself, also admitted to shooting and wounding someone who'd thrown rocks in his car 8 months earlier. His statements were subsequently used as evidence against him in court when he was charged in connection to the cold case homicide, as well as the second non-fatal shooting. In November of 2022, Tasini was convicted of murder despite not personally firing the shots that resulted in Geiss's death. Number 4. Shelley Hilliard. In October of 2011, the police in Madison Heights, Michigan were called to a local Motel 6, where 19-year-old Shelley Hilliard and a male companion were found to be in possession of marijuana. Officers Chad Wallowich and David Kohler threatened Hilliard and her friend Michael Slaughter with jail time unless they cooperated with them in their efforts to identify their dealer. Hilliard called the individual who'd supplied them the drugs Qasim Red Rakib and asked him to come to the Motel 6. When Rakib did so, he was ambushed by the police, who took him and his associate, Marquita Clark, into custody on charges of possession with intent to distribute. In the early hours of the morning on October the 23rd, Rakib and an individual named James Matthews lured Hilliard to a house in the 900 block of Longfellow Street in Detroit, under the pretense that one of them was interested in going on a date with her. Upon her arrival at the address, Hilliard became concerned after seeing both men waiting for her and asked her taxi driver to stay on a phone call with her to make sure she was all right. Shortly thereafter, the cabbie reportedly heard her shout, "No!" after which the call went dead. Court records indicated that Rakib and Matthews proceeded to brutally assault Hilliard for acting as a police informant, which had allegedly been revealed to them by officers Wallowich and Kohler. Hilliard eventually succumbed to her severe beating injuries, at which point her killers dismembered her corpse and scattered her body parts at various locations around Detroit. Although both men were eventually arrested, convicted, and sentenced in connection to Hilliard's slaying, the victim's mother filed a lawsuit against the Madison Heights Police Department for their alleged role in her death. The woman claimed that the officers had coerced her daughter into serving as an informant and had given Rakib enough information while he was in custody to seek revenge against the young woman for doing so. In October of 2017, the two sides reportedly reached a settlement, awarding Hilliard's mother a $1 million payout. Number 3. Christopher Dean. In October of 2016, 33-year-old Christopher Dean was summoned to the Atlanta home of brothers Xavier and Orlando Gibson, where he reportedly expected to complete a drug transaction. Instead, Dean was brutally attacked by a group of 5 local gangsters who discovered that the man had once served as a police witness in California. The assailants used a 2x4 and a crowbar to beat the victim to a bloody pulp before abusing him with a handle-like object and inflicting burns on his body. It was only then that they executed him by way of 2 gunshots to the back of the head. Following the gruesome killing, which was a reported effort to show other gang members that any involvement with the police would not be tolerated, Dean's mutilated body was shoved into the trunk of his car. The gangsters parked the vehicle in the lot at Hamilton E. Holmes subway station, where it was eventually discovered by the authorities. In the wake of the murder, Atlanta police arrested Christopher Lockett, Jasper Green, Joshua Rooks, Quartez Clark, and Xavier Gibson, all belonging to the group known as the Gangster Disciples. During the case's court proceedings, prosecutors alleged that none of the suspects had expressed even an iota of remorse for their heinous actions. It also emerged that leading up to the night of the incident, Dean had been attempting to clean up his act and believed that he'd be able to repent of his life of crime following one final drug deal. He was survived by 2 young sons. Each of the defendants were ultimately given life sentences for the crime.
Hey, it's Carl. Be sure to subscribe and leave your comments in the comments section below, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get your video going next.
Number 2. Whitey Bulger. For many years, started in 1975, infamous Boston mobster Whitey Bulger served as an informant for the FBI, but the specific details regarding the manner of his recruitment is a widely debated topic. According to official reports on the matter, the Winter Hill gang boss agreed to give authorities information about the Patriarca crime family, his rivals based out of Boston and Providence, Rhode Island, although Bulger himself publicly denied it. In exchange for the inside information, the Winter Hill gang was effectively given immunity and allowed to conduct their criminal enterprise without fear of legal repercussions. It was also reported that Bulger's FBI handler, John Connolly, would give him valuable information about his competitors as part of their covert partnership. In 1988, the Boston Globe's so-called Spotlight team released a story highlighting Bulger's informant status and how he'd been unable to continue committing crimes for years because of his cooperation with federal authorities. During the 1990s, media reports began to trickle out implicating various federal, state, and local officials with ties to Bulger in instances of criminal activity. The notorious gangster eventually became an FBI fugitive, and by the turn of the 21st century was considered the most wanted man in the world besides Osama bin Laden. He and his longtime girlfriend were finally apprehended at an apartment complex in Santa Monica, California, in the summer of 2011. Bulger was given a pair of life terms, but only 5 years into his sentence, he was brutally beaten to death by fellow inmates after being transferred to the United States Penitentiary, Hazleton, near Brewston Mills, West Virginia. In December of 2022, an official U.S. Department of Justice inquiry into Bulger's death determined that it had been precipitated by bureaucratic incompetence and serious job performance failures on the part of prison officials. Number 1. Susan Smith. In 1987, an FBI agent arrived in Pikeville, Kentucky on his first assignment, aimed at tracking down an ex-convict and bank robber named Carl Edward Cat Eyes Lockhart. A sheriff's deputy suggested that the agent, Mark Putnam, get in contact with a local woman by the name of Susan Smith. The latter subsequently served as Putnam's confidential informant, with the two regularly meeting to exchange information about Lockhart's criminal activities. By December, they'd gathered enough evidence to sentence Lockhart to 57 years in prison for robbery. Smith was reportedly compensated with a cash reward of $5,000. In the months that followed, Putnam and Smith eventually developed an intimate relationship with one another. The agent, who was married at the time, subsequently became concerned that his secret involvement with his former informant might prove detrimental to his career, and he thus requested to be transferred to Florida. The situation was further complicated, however, when Smith revealed that she was pregnant with Putnam's baby. The latter suggested that he and his wife could adopt the child, but Smith insisted that they raise it together. Then, on June the 8th of 1989, Putnam and Smith got into a heated argument that ultimately turned physical. The man fatally strangled his lover and dumped her body along an old coal mining road. He and his family moved to Florida, and Smith's murder remained unsolved until the following year, when suspicions began to fall on her former FBI handler. Upon being questioned, Putnam confessed and was later sentenced to 16 years in prison as the first FBI agent to be convicted of murder. The man was released in 2000 at the age of 41, at which point he moved to Georgia, where he remarried and began work as a personal trainer. Thanks for watching. Would you infiltrate an infamous gang on behalf of the police if the alternative was spending 20 years in prison? Let us know in the comments section below.